the Justice Department released a new batch of documents in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, including chilling new evidence that some viewers may find disturbing. This is a jailhouse letter, apparently written by a Jeffrey Epstein. It says J. Epstein, and it was sent to another infamous sex offender. That would be Larry Nassar. The letter appears to include a reference to President Trump. We should note President Trump is not accused of any criminal wrongdoing. And I just spoke to a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, Haley Robeson, a short time ago. Here's what she said. And DOJ says some of these things are salacious and there's no truth behind it. That's the statement it just released. But what do you think about the mention of Trump in that letter and what it said?
I think it's very apparent in that specific letter that was just publicized from the Epstein files. I think it's very apparent that there are a group of men that enjoy the company of young women and children. And I think that letter emphasizes that he knew what was going on. And that complicity is enough for me to know you have no business being in the position of power.
Strong words there from Haley Robeson. Let's go live now to CNN senior reporter Marshall Cohen join us here in the Situation Room. So walk us through that letter. What did it actually say, Marshall?
Yeah, Pam. So let's be really clear about what we know and what we don't know. We have actually been aware for a couple years that Epstein tried to send a letter, or maybe did send a letter, to Nassar from prison. That's been out there. We had never seen it before, and it apparently was in the drop today from the Justice Department. It was written to LN, Larry Nassar, on the envelope, and it was signed by J. Epstein. And it was postmarked just a couple days after Epstein's suicide. No conspiracy there. It's not too crazy to think that prison officials will need to look at stuff before it goes out in the mail. So it's dated just a few days after that suicide, and I will read for you what it said. And as you mentioned, Pam, it's kind of disturbing. This is the letter. Quote, "As you know by now, I have taken the short route home. Good luck. We shared one thing, our love and caring for young ladies and the hope that they'd reach their full potential. Our president also shares our love of young nubile girls," which is obviously the disgusting words of one sexual predator to another. But I should make clear that Donald Trump has never been accused of any sexual wrongdoing by law enforcement, and obviously he's never been charged with any of these Epstein-related crimes.
And so the short route home reference, do we think that's him talking about dying by suicide? Because it came out a few days after,
right? The timeline would seem to suggest so.
Yeah. We're also seeing this 2021 Mar-a-Lago subpoena relating to the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Yeah. This is new, right? Do we not know about the subpoena to Mar-a-Lago?
I didn't know about it. And
okay,
I don't
Marshall Cohen, you've been all over this story.
I don't think it was out there before. Our colleague Michael Williams found it this morning in the batch of 30,000 documents, a subpoena sent by the Justice Department to Mar-a-Lago October 2021, just a few weeks before the start of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. It is redacted, but it is clear through the redactions that they were looking for employment records about someone. We don't know who. But I should point out that we do know that there was one very well-known person that did work at Mar-a-Lago and was actually recruited to work for Epstein, and that was Virginia Giuffre, who was one of Epstein's victims. Not sure if the subpoena is about her, but there's been a lot of talk about her being at both Mar-a-Lago and Epstein's estate, and she died by suicide earlier this year.
Yeah, very sad. How is the DOJ responding to all of these revelations? Because it put out a statement with this batch, but not the first one.
They went on the offensive this morning and on offense to defend Donald Trump. Let me read for you what they put out in a tweet this morning as they rolled out this batch of tens of thousands of files. They said some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, these claims are unfounded and false. If they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against Trump already. So framing the entire conversation right off the bat to say, if you see stuff about Trump, don't believe it. But as the woman you just spoke to in the last hour made clear, there's a lot of stuff in here that has been vetted and verified. Maxwell was convicted. Epstein, before he was charged with the federal case, he had been convicted in a state case 20 years earlier. So, the Justice Department sort of massaging the situation here, trying to defend Trump, but as we've seen, there's a lot of stuff in here that has been verified and has vindicated a lot of those victims.
All right, Marshall Cohen, thank you as always. I know you and the team have a lot of work going through these documents.
I want to bring in Nick Ackerman, former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor. He joins us by phone. So, Nick, a letter like that from Jeffrey Epstein in the days before he took his own life. Epstein, of course, who had a plea deal from years before and was accused of sexual abuse at the time he wrote it. A letter like that written to another sex abuser. Does it have any legal significance?
Well, I don't know how much legal significance it has. It certainly corroborates what we've heard from other victims, that Donald Trump had an inclination to grab women and misuse his position in various ways before he became president. And it's consistent with all these other people have said. And it's also consistent with Donald Trump's 50th birthday wish to Jeffrey Epstein. So whether or not this would be admissible in a court of law is a whole different story. But certainly from a political standpoint and from the fact that this is something that Jeffrey Epstein was saying, we know that they were very close and they're very good friends. And that this is pretty damning. I mean, to go on with this letter, it says in that letter, when a young beauty walked by, he loved to grab, snatch, whereas we ended up snatching grub in the mess halls of the system, meaning the prison system. And he signed it saying, "Life is unfair, yours, J. Epstein." So you've got two, essentially, abusers that are writing to each other, and in the course of that, Jeffrey Epstein references Donald Trump, who has gotten away with all of this.
It is worth noting, obviously, that President Trump or Donald Trump not charged with anything in connection with Jeffrey Epstein at all. It's also possible that Jeffrey Epstein was trying to stick it to Donald Trump, who was president at this point, the moment that the letter was written. Of greater, perhaps, legal significance, Nick, is the other information that came out overnight. A letter written by an attorney for the Southern District of New York, which indicated, and this is a verbatim, that Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously had been recorded or that we were aware. And at times, on two of the flights, two of the passengers were women who would be possible witnesses in a Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, again, this letter was written at the time, late in Donald Trump's first term when he was president. But the idea that Trump had been on a plane with two people who were witnesses, potentially, in a federal case, what's the significance there?
Well, the significance is that Donald Trump would, of course, be a potential witness as well, which means that he could have been called at the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. So that's pretty shocking, the fact that he could have been called as a witness. That's something that I don't think has been reported before. And it also goes to Donald Trump's knowledge of what Epstein was doing. I mean, don't forget, he's been backing off at every point he can, claiming that he had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was doing anything illegal. But as these Epstein files come out with the drip, 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 we have learned that Donald Trump knew a bit more than he's acknowledged. For example, there's the email of April 2nd, 2011, where it reflects an email between Epstein and Maxwell, where it says that Donald Trump spent hours in Epstein's house with Virginia, who is one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual escapades.
Of course, Virginia Giuffre, before she died, said that Donald Trump did not do anything wrong or untoward. And it's also worth noting that the plane trips in question here were between 1993 and 1996, a time before Epstein was charged with anything. Nick Ackerman, a lot of context here, a lot of new information coming out. CNN continues to sift through it. Thank you very much.